Firstly, thank you. Really, really happy to be on this Dr. HR series, Anil. So maybe I can just start with my introduction, right, to get this sort of leadership conversation going. As everybody would know, I kind of come from the human resources sort of background. Currently, I'm working with Philips as the head of human resources across the Indian subcontinent. Have been with Philips for just completed a year, and I think it's been fascinating for me. And I'll talk a little bit about my choices, but very quickly, a professional summary is that I have 2 decades of now working experience in human resources. I've done different types of roles. I've worked, I think, what the most, I would say, my favorite part of my own sort of career summary is that I've had the opportunity to work across multiple sectors and industries. And I think that's something that I feel really good about, because it probably pushes you to explore an area that you don't know much, right? So from a learning standpoint, it's something that I hold special. So yeah, I started in an IT services company, started with Cognizant. It was a campus role. Post that, I mean, where I was just playing an HR generalist role. It was the start of the career. It was in Bangalore. It was a site that was growing. It was a company that was growing. So yeah, it was a really good experience. And today, when you see Cognizant as one of like the leading sort of services companies, I would say IT services companies in the world, it's fascinating to see that sort of trajectory as to how companies can probably grow and become sort of relevant. But from there, I went on to do consulting, and I tell a lot of people who are young in their careers, it's something that if you have a chance, right, I would always say go for it, right? Because it's almost like it's a crash course in trying to pick up new skills, and skills that sometimes we in HR may not have. For example, today, many a times, I think I've become very comfortable with public speaking or speaking in meetings. And this has not just happened overnight, right? I think it was because of that experience in consulting where you go, you're presenting to very senior people, to boards, to management teams. So it's a skill that you build, right? Which I'm not sure it would have been a strength today if I wasn't in that opportunity, right? Similarly, I think like if I look at business development, and I know like lots of HR people may say, but if I'm in HR, why should I sell? But again, I think when you're in consulting, there is nothing like, oh, you're a consultant who does not bring in business. So I think it was again an incredible new skill set where you have to go, you have to pitch, you have to make proposals. And it's a little bit about what your business does, right? In some sense, as they're kind of acquiring customers. So again, a very sort of different skill set. And I think the third thing that I love about consulting is also the fact that it's multi-industry and multifaceted, right? So you're kind of going in, you have very little time to understand the context. You have to get that context, look at some sort of frameworks, and then get out a recommendation that's actually feasible and makes sense for the organization. So I think the learning that that you receive in a very quick sort of time frame is pretty unique to consulting. And of course, it pushes you to be agile because there's so much that's happening. So yeah, so big recommendation, especially for people who are in their journeys exploring what they want to do. Consulting, give it a shot, will teach you stuff that not necessarily you would learn otherwise. And post that interesting stint in consulting, I actually moved to a large financial corporation, which is American Express. It was I would say a planned move. It was because, as they say, it's the consultant itch, where you want to move from just recommendations to kind of going into implementation and saying, how do you follow through? And I think in the first few years, that was the biggest aha, to say, oh my God, this is how things actually get executed. So again, if you do consulting, and I have lots of friends who stayed in consulting, but I think when you come back into line HR, it is that ability to execute, to implement, to take stakeholders along, to measure sort of outcomes. I think that is what that next stint of mine gave. And I think American Express is special because it was, again, a very diversified organization. It gave me the opportunity to do different roles because I started off in a COE role. It was more a rewards role. I did that. I had the chance to do a role focused on diversity and inclusion, so something that was completely alien to me. It was just kind of coming up. Even in the COE role, health and well-being, like we're talking about, I don't know what, 16 years ago, was nascent in this country. So just the fact that it gave me an exposure to say how can preventive healthcare really be an opportunity for an organization, right? And today we see most companies, we have lots of health providers, and now it's almost like I think I've kind of seen that journey of it being premature to kind of move in that maturity sort of curve. Similarly with I think diversity and inclusion. So I did some of these COE roles, and then I had this opportunity to kind of get into more, I would say, a mainline HR business partner sort of role, but with the focus of transformation and change. And I took that, and there's probably no looking back, because I think for me that was instrumental. Because my first head of HR role was in American Express, and I think it came because of the opportunities that I got in the company. So that was Amex. And then I think after spending 12 long years there, it was more around trying to do something in the digital ecosystem. And that's how Uber happened. And Uber was a phenomenal experience because it was at a time where the company was not listed. There was lots of build opportunity in the HR function. And then kind of seeing that company kind of going public, building out teams. And most importantly, it was incredible to experience the business model, right? Of how things get done, what agility really means, what is this bigger purpose, working with this new age sort of teams. So that was great. And also, I think Uber gave me the opportunity for my first sort of regional leadership role, because I was doing for the last probably 2 odd years there, an Asia Pacific role, but I did that remote. So again, lots of learnings, lots of challenges. I think it's always a mixed bag in every role. But I look at my stint at Uber with lots of fondness, and I think like the pace and the learning was incredible. And I was surrounded with such capable sort of talent. It was a very, very, I think, nice experience. And then comes Philips, right? Philips is this really nice blend. It's trying to get into, I mean, it is a health technology sort of company. It's morphing, it's transforming. It's an industry that I don't know. And I think that's something that, again, keeps me on my toes. So I'm still learning. It's just been a year. Very diverse in its operations in the Indian subcontinent. So far, so good, Anil. So if anyone were to ask me to say, is there anything that you'd want to do different if you kind of look at your career, the way it's kind of gone? I just feel I've been blessed, but I've also, I think, made few choices which have helped me kind of navigate my career, right? Whether it is doing COE roles, kind of switching your tracks a little bit. I think you have to be a little bit open to explore what comes your way, not withstanding the fact that, okay, if you don't like it, you can always go back to what you were doing. So yeah, all in all, that's been, I think, the summary of where I am today.
When we are going through the biggest humanitarian crisis ever in the form of a pandemic, a COVID situation, do you also see emergence of few unwritten competencies for HR leaders?
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? Because I saw this interesting cartoon graphic. I don't remember in which publication, or maybe it was online, right? And it kind of showed that during the pandemic, like there were like the two sort of the C-suite roles that were at the driving wheel, right? And it was actually the CTO, right? Because of, we all know the importance of technology, the importance of technology, not just for employees, for customers, for processes, right? And the second was the CHRO, right? And I found that visual very interesting, because if you look at on the HR side, it was all about how do you drive this change and this transformation. At the same time, how are you kind of looking out for the well-being of your employee base, but yet how you're thinking into the future. So if you kind of think of the competencies, Anil, I don't think it's like something completely new, but I think in the last few years, that is the role of HR, right? We are kind of becoming that champions of change in some sense. So, change agility, if you ask me, is probably that number one sort of competency, and the courage to lead. Because I do think that, again, for the HR function, we don't know what we don't know, right? Like today, we're talking about future of work. Is there a predictive model around what's going to work? I don't think so, right? But there are lots of experiments, lots of assumptions, lots of data that's being kind of considered. So again, if you look at the competency, like what would it be? It's the ability to probably make courageous decisions. It's the ability to influence. It's the ability to think into the future. It's the ability to charter the unknown, right? So in the past, it was probably driving change because every organization was transforming. Now it's that, but it's also probably playing a role in terms of, I would say, shaping the future thinking from a strategic lens, right? Because the business is thinking customers, business, revenue, but I think the HR function has a strong role to say, okay, to make all this happen, then how should we be structured, right? Whether it's organization wise, skills wise, capabilities wise, probably is those two.
During this time, also one change that we all have witnessed, HR professionals, is most of the organizations moving towards work from home or probably work from anywhere kind of a workplace arrangement. It also came in with some sort of problems, be it lack of bandwidth or be it in terms of creating more mental stress. How did
Yes.
you manage this aspect specifically during the transition phase in the last 8 months, 10 months? Or what would be your recommendation? Or how should somebody go ahead and manage without losing focus on the performance aspects? One,
Yeah.
human aspect is important, but how can one balance between what is good for business in terms of people and business deliverables?
Absolutely. And I think it's a very interesting question, Anil, and I'm going to take it at two levels. Okay. One is more the organization lens, right? Because we in HR, as we put on that hat, and then one will be more at an individual lens to say we as human beings, right? How do we kind of navigate this? So from an organizational lens, again, I always feel like, and that's true, right? We are that balancing factor, right? As a function, we have to advocate for the organization or the employer, but I do think we have a strong role of advocating for the employees because that is why we have the seat at the table, right? So now in this pandemic, and exactly what you've said, every organization has done lots of sort of listening surveys and employee surveys. And I think the findings have been interesting. So, on one hand, and I can share more what I have seen, overall engagement levels probably are higher than before, right? And that is because when you go deeper, people like the flexibility, the choice, the ability to, as you said, work from anywhere, balancing their personal professional needs, etc., etc. But the challenges are also very common, right? Because you spoke about the fact that a lot of people feel that they're being overworked because there is no start and stop, right? Like the simplest of things to say that if and I'm talking about a woman, right? I am that caregiver at home. I have to probably that half an hour in the afternoon or 45 minutes in the afternoon to ensure that my family gets their lunch is important, but not everybody may understand that, right? Because you could have meetings, then do you attend the meeting or do you do what you have to do, right? So I think the other bit which is gender agnostic is this whole concept of we all love to work, but we all know like this concept of, oh, my network is bad today, oh, I can't switch on my video today, or the fact that you have 5 people logging onto the same Wi-Fi sort of connection at home. These are all sort of realities. The good part, I think, Anil, is that because of the time that has lapsed, right? We're talking about a good 1 year that we've operated in this model. A couple of things. One is, as a human race, I feel, right? As an organization, employer, employees, we found some sort of turnarounds. Small examples, right? I remember like the way like your internal sort of networks were set up. earlier when the pandemic started, because I remember like some of the software communities, like the time it was taking to download, because you want to balance security with speed, etc. It was not optimal. But in the last few months, I know they've probably worked out accesses, where these things are being hosted to probably facilitate this process. So again, that whole angle of CTO to say, what is the IT infrastructure that can make it easier and simpler? Like, do you really need to connect to just the internet, or do you need to connect to the internet plus, like, say, your Cisco or like whatever, like the sort of interfaces, right? So there have been, I think, some sort of help that's come that way. The second thing is, a lot of organizations have realized to say is that, can we actually help our employees by giving them policies that will make this easy, right? So for instance, we all have heard of, like, including like Philips at least, right, where we've given out home office sort of reimbursement, saying, okay, do the basics, we understand, right? Like, you need something, you need a comfortable chair, you need like whatever, like some of the basic stuff, go ahead and get that. Or like, instead of like in the past everyone giving out mobile allowances, like, can we give you at least something, or repurpose something to give you better sort of broadband? So I think like we've adapted. So if you ask me, in the last 1 year, has it come down from 100 to 0? Perhaps not. But has it come down? I would say the intensity. Some of it has, maybe around infrastructure. Some of it has in terms of adopting to this, where people earlier weren't comfortable with Zoom or Teams, and now it's become a common, right? The fact that you see some videos on, some videos off, but overall the quality of your conversations are still probably good. So culturally, it's become probably acceptable, which is also great. I think the third leg, and that's maybe a little bit more true to, I would say, the culture in the country, is this bit about, like, again, I don't want to generalize, but there are some nationalities and some countries, right, where people are very clear, like, at this time, this is what I need to do, or this is when I will turn off my computer. I feel like Indians, and I'm generalizing here, sometimes we're challenged to sometimes say, hey, it's 6 o'clock, I need to do something that needs my attention at home. Uh, so I think that's the area where managers and employees need to help each other. Managers have to be more sensitive, and I think that's the role of the employer, to say, how do we get them to appreciate this? How do we get them to probably look at like mental health? What is the role of the manager, right? Like, that's where I think the organization can help via policies, sensitizing managers. I think employees, and I think the newer age employees, they're more vocal, they're more expressive. I think it's their role to probably talk out and chart out. The bottom line is, as long as we're productive, and that's my personal view, is that output or outcome is a better driver of productivity than just input, right? Which is just in terms of time. And I understand there are some roles that can't be measured like that, because if you think of production roles, or like, like some call center roles where it is input is as important. But as long as you're productive, I think everything else can probably be managed out. So again, they will, I think 1 year later, until if we have this conversation, maybe we figured out many more things, right? But there's a lot that's happening, and I genuinely feel we're all trying and we're getting better with time, and it's not like our challenges have probably come down to 0. That was more on the organizational view, right? And now coming to more the personal view, as the individual, as me, or as you, or as, a third person, I think it's again been a journey, because all of us are discovering what works, what doesn't work. And especially if you look at this year, right, versus wave 1 versus wave 2, I think wave 2, we know of many more people who've been impacted, many more people where families have probably lost sort of loved ones. So there is this element of this pandemic becoming extremely real. So this, I think, at least for me, it's again a balance to say that, if you would ask me to say, has it been easy for you, Vishpala? I mean, I would say, yeah, Anil, everything was a breeze. I managed myself in the last 1 year. I don't think so. That's not true. I think the truth is that, like every other human being, it's a journey, right? There are some days up, some days down, but as long as you're in that range, right? It's probably okay. There are some goods and some bads. But I would say that if you're getting out of those range, and that's when you have to be more sort of conscious to say, what is pushing you there? Is it a situation at home? Is it because you're not able to manage, your personal commitments? Is it your children, the time with their academics? Is it something at work? And then you have to probably make some decisions to say, how do you stay in that course? And like we were chatting in smaller groups in the office just around this, and everyone had a different story to share. Like someone said, I get up in the morning, I go cycling, that just keeps me sane. Someone else spoke about, oh, for me it's about probably praying, right? For someone else it's about playing with their toddlers. For someone it's about looking after their pets. For others it's about, me going and volunteering in the community. So it's completely different. But I do think that, I mean, the one thing nice is the pandemic has probably given us is that time to look within us to say, what keeps you going, right? And I hope the answer is it's a mix of something in your personal sphere and your professional sphere, because that what is probably that makes it complete.
And how does the HR professional make a move in terms of preparing a framework which gives clarity, which has been perceived by the target audience that this is fair and this is competitive also? So if you have to do that strategy piece from HR standpoint, what are the components that you will keep in back of your mind and how to go about it?
I mean, firstly, see, I think we all need to understand that compensation, as they say, is an art, right? The reason I'm saying it's an art and not a science is because there's an element of it's not 1+1 = 2, right? Because it starts with, I would say, any other area. It's about what is the philosophy of the organization. And we all know, like if you look around across industries, a lot of companies have taken a stance, and that's what defines their rewards philosophy. So I think the starting point is, what is the rewards? And I'm not saying compensation, because rewards is broader, right? There is compensation, there is benefits, there is obviously LTIA, and in the broader sense of rewards, there is also, elements like career, etc., right? Learning, which is really rewards. But even if you look at the fundamentals of rewards, what is the philosophy? Where do you want to be, and what do you want to be known for? And I think every company has to define that for themselves. So, I mean, I would say it starts with the conversation with the CEO to say, what is like ultimately a talent strategy, right? Because if you look at startups, right, Anil, there are different people who do different things. Now, if you're getting into an industry where I mean, there's a dearth of talent, or you have to go out and acquire, you're like buying. Obviously, your compensation philosophy will probably look a little bit different compared to a matured sort of organization. So, where do you want to benchmark yourself, right? Because I honestly think that at least initially, some benchmark is important, because you can't go in blind. So, who's your benchmark, right? It starts with that. And your benchmark is, what is the talent marketplace you want to, just attract or talent from. So once you define that and you get a benchmark, then it gets down to positioning. Where do you want to position yourself? And we all know that most organizations, large organizations, would say they want to be around the median. But the median of what, right? So how do you define who's your competitive landscape? And then you have like some indication. So one is, that's probably a good start point. The second is fundamentally, I would say, from a reward standpoint, is what are your structural elements from a reward standpoint, right? Like we all know, of course, there is a fixed compensation, there is statutory in terms of sort of retirals, right? That's a no-brainer. But then what happens to stuff that is over and above? Because that's where, again, the reward sort of philosophy comes in. A classic case, right? Most startups obviously leverage much more around ownership, around like stock options, around equity, because that is the nature of work, to say that there is more risk and there is probably more gain, right? And as a result of which, that most levels would probably have some form of sort of equity. But it again comes down to that philosophy at the organization level to say ownership. And we know like some really famous sort of startup companies where they believe that ownership should happen from, employee number one to employee number nth, right? Where it's across grades, across levels, across functions. And that's the philosophy versus there are some organizations who may say that, that is really for milestones or for certain sort of. So again, it's a very fundamental question to say what are the building blocks of compensation, right? And then I would say benefits, right, is again a huge piece to say what is your philosophy, right? We all would love to give everything that we could give, but that's when budgets to say goes back to where you want to position, what are those benefits and how will you prioritize and how will you deliver? Because if you have this much budget, should you just give it all and say, hey, employee, go ahead and choose on this concept of flexible benefits? Or, okay, there are some fixed, there are some sort of linked to a certain role. So again, like as I said, it's an art, right? That's why it's an art. It's like a canvas that you have to probably paint. There's no right or wrong. And I think the most important thing is that you have to keep probably relooking at that. Because I don't think if you start with something, it's that you should end with the same thing. And I'm not talking about large corporations here, but as companies are starting off, you probably have to also figure out as to where is the right place that you want to end up. And I think the last piece does not go without saying, like employee preferences. Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to get in talent from a certain sector, right? Or, okay, here is let's look at retail or something like that, right? So there is this talent that comes with a certain expectation. So are you going to say that your employee experience is going to be similar? So here are some standard benefits. So it again kind of comes down to say, what do your employees value or want? And I think the last thing that I have learned, Anil, is that change can be difficult. When you introduce something and when it's in place for many years, right? Every time you have to go back to the drawing board and say that, hey, the benchmarks have changed, employee preferences have changed, and here's something that we need to do different. It's easy to add, but it's difficult to probably modify. And that's where I think the HR person plays a role to say, how are you connected with what's happening, what your employees want, and are we really focusing on, as long as that there's a budget, like here is the cost.
Sure.
Delivery, I think, is the role of the HR person to say, can it be more effective? How can it get done? But we should keep asking that question and not just say, oh, we figured this all out and it's probably done.
And while being on the same theme of performance management, Vishpala, one rapid fire question. What do you think as a HR practitioner? Should we be rewarding effort or should we be rewarding outcome?
For me, it's always outcomes. My personal choice, I would say, because I would say this should be true for every function, right? Including HR, because sometimes in HR, a lot of things are qualitative, right? But I strongly believe there has to be an output. Now, the output may not be same for every team, every function. Some of it can be at a team level if you can't do it at an individual level. But my personal, because it's rapid fire, I'm not going to give you an explanation, is it should be output or outcome versus effort. A lot of organizations are morphing this not just to results, right? But how you get your work done. That it's mostly output, but there is definitely a value. I mean, it's an underlying theme of the qualitative aspect of how you drive performance is also, I think, a key metric.
Do you still believe loyalty has got any role in an organizational scenario? And when I'm saying loyalty, let me clarify also, I'm not only referring to loyalty to manager or loyalty to organization, loyalty to my profession also.
That's a really good question, right? And again, I'm of the view that if you really want to build an inclusive culture or an inclusive organization, you need a mixed bag, right? And a mixed bag is not just people of different genders, religion, cultures, but I also think tenor, right? And I think we know that especially in India, if you kind of cut the data, most companies, and I'm not saying all, average tenure will probably be between, I would say, 1 to maybe 2.5 years, like average tenure. And then depending on the company, you would have like, the industry and the organization, you could have buckets of people, greater than 10 years, less than 10 years. But simply put, Anil, in my mind, there is no right or wrong, right? Is loyalty important? I think so. But I don't know if we can define what is the threshold of loyalty. So does loyalty mean I'm here for 2 years, I'm giving you all I have, I'm doing what I can do, I'm creating impact, I'm creating output. On the third year, if I move to a different team in the organization, does that qualify as loyalty? But if I move to a different company, does that mean I'm not loyal? So I'm kind of questioning that definition of loyalty, because see, one of the things I think, like, again, with the newer sort of generations where, Gen Zs and millennials, we know flexibility or the freedom to choose is an important metric. And I think, again, when you marry the landscape of, oh, there's going to be more gig opportunities. Like, look at what Swiggy and Zomato and Uber. I mean, we're creating employment at people's own sort of, flexible terms. I can choose to work when I want to work. So if you take that into concept, and we also know, like, I know some companies would like it, but people are on multiple platforms at the same time, right? So then what is loyalty? So I just feel like it is being redefined as we speak. So I would say, as long as we have people's commitment to whatever they're doing, right? I would say that is the biggest driver, because we also know, and I'm not trying to play the devil's advocate. See, there are some industries where loyalty is a premium, and for me, their loyalty is more subject matter expertise, right? If you think of roles where you need research, where continuity is almost so important for that product to be developed, of course, there it is. Like, if you're a scientist, it obviously does not make sense for you to jump from one place to another. But there are some roles which could be more sort of interoperable, right? Where you may say, I'm choosing to work on this platform, or I'm choosing to work on the skill set, where I think the boundaries are going to get less blurry. So it may again be linked to what type of role, what type of industry. And I think in the end, we'll need all. But the way we're heading, I think there will be a majority that's probably in this slightly more fluid world, where it's more around competencies, more around platforms, more around opportunities, more around flexibility. But there will be many other groups where we want continuity, right? And I think it's not just for the organization, but for the employee as well. So yeah, so going back to where I started, it's an inclusive world, and I think there's a place for everyone and everybody, and I don't think it's right to say it's either this or either that. And I think people have to choose, and companies have to choose to say what makes more sense where.
Typically, in organizations, we have employee engagement forums, or forums where a disgruntled or an aggrieved employee can put forth his or her point of disconnect, right? When it comes to employees. Now, at a CXO level, what happens when somebody is not very happy, or when there are no forums available to vent it out? How does one manage that situation, specifically at a CXO level?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, right? Because we always assume that your senior leaders are the most engaged, or like have the responsibility of engaging their teams. But then what about them, right? That's probably what you're referring to. It's interesting that you say, Anil, but it depends on the number of people you have at those senior levels, right? Now, obviously, you can't single out ones and twos, because for individuals, then it has to be a personal rapport, right? Where if they can't talk to the CEO, can they talk to the head of HR? Because I do think that the head of HR, right, in companies has the role of being that advisor, right? Where you can probably understand better what is the driver. Is it style? Is it collaborative aspects? Is it team dynamics? So I think there's a role that the head of HR can play, right, in terms of trying to assess this, as well as probably, take sort of, I would say, actions around it. So for instance, you have a new management team, or you have a new sort of CEO, like what is the styles of leadership? Is there, are they complementary, or at least try to create awareness and stuff like that. And to your point, for individuals, if it's more an individual issue, how do you provide them that comfort to say that it's confidential, you understand, but it has to move beyond that. How do you help resolve? Is it okay, let me probably broach this with the CEO, or can we get you a coach, or whatever the action is. But I think the other thing is, if you think of even our employee surveys, right, Anil, when you kind of cut it by management level, because even the senior most people are expected to take these surveys. Because in one of my organizations, without really naming it, I remember, like, one of the years when we cut it, right, we actually saw that the senior most group was actually the most disengaged. And it was there in the data, right? And there, but it was a group. So again, it can't be 2-3 people, right? It has to be more than 10 people, or like, it will be the smallest group. So when you have that, then you obviously have to do what you do with other groups, right? You'll have to do a few FGDs because it's leaders. You can probably do one-on-ones to probably dig a little bit deeper to say, again, are there collective themes? So I don't think it's impossible. It again depends on, is it a group? Is it an individual? And I think ultimately, the CEO and the CHRO, in some sense, ideally should be accessible to this group where, even if it's a regular check-in, like, you have to have that, I would say, that openness to probably talk. Because if not, I'm sure the person is eventually just going to move out of that role, right? Like it or not. Yeah, I mean, interesting, right? You're saying high touch versus high tech. So I don't think we can choose to ignore technology. I mean, it's there, it's right at the center, and it is going to change the way we do everything. Because I was reading an article recently on some of the predictions for 2030, like how will our world look like, right? And some of the stuff we've started to see, like if you think of wearable devices, right? Today, everyone sports something. They're monitoring their sleep, they're monitoring their heartbeat, they're monitoring now their O2 levels. Look at the amount of data and tech that has crept into our personal lives, right? And is this going to become even bigger? Absolutely. Now, in terms of how do you define high touch, because we're still social creatures, right? So I don't think we're going to move into this isolated pods just because there's technology. It's a little bit, right, this whole debate around automation, right? Saying, oh, there's going to be automation, there's going to be bots. Does that mean there's going to be no jobs for human beings? And I think we've already established that the nature of jobs are going to probably change, but it's not like human beings are not going to have jobs, right? The skill sets could be different. And I think it's a little bit like that. Our interactions may change. So today, let's take the example of this very recording. Like a year or two ago, I don't think we would even have done this, right? We would say, oh, let's probably just wait for things to settle down. But today it's very seamless. Like, I didn't have a question on, oh, is it Zoom? How do I log into Zoom, right? I didn't. Or the fact that we're conversing for the last many minutes, we know how this is then going to get used using technology to refine it, to edit it, and to broadcast it. Now, if you put this from your definition of high tech and high touch, I think it touches both, right? So we're still having a conversation. It's not like I'm recording in my own pod, you've just sent me some things, or like a computer is asking me some questions. Now, in the future, I'm hoping it still is not going to be that, right? So it's always going to be a blended model where you'll need human touch, but you will need technology. And I think the way technology is accelerating change is probably going to be a little bit like that. And I think, like, for us as human beings, we are trying to kind of keep pace as well. In conclusion, I would just say that, at least for all, like, your audience, I mean, it's wonderful to have resources like this. So I think a huge call out to you, Anil, for still taking the time, right, to probably do this to benefit, hopefully, many others via like all these talks that you're sharing. So kudos to you on that. I think my only concluding remark is, like to all the audience is, it's an interesting time that we're living in, right? Because many of our uh, parents, grandparents will probably say, we can either choose to look at this to say that, oh my God, why did we get stuck in this pandemic, right? Or we can choose to think to say that we've experienced this pandemic. There is always some good that comes out of it, right? So I would say choose to look at the silver lining versus the darkness of the clouds, right? In some sense. So I think that's where I would like to leave it. And obviously, just wishing that everyone stays safe and yeah, follow your heart.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure listening to Vishpalla in any forum. And thanks a lot for those learning, Vishpalla. Could not thank you enough for your kindness. I'm glad that finally, we could do this. And I'm sure I enjoyed thoroughly this interaction. And all my viewers would also agree.